welcome to the witty panel on artificial intelligence, going where technology has never been before. I'm Karen Cohn, and I'm the moderator, and we have an exceptionally knowledgeable panel with us today. And I just what our plan is we're going to go through and introduce the panel. I will introduce the panel. I'll give you a little bit of setting the stage for AI, after which we'll start asking the panelists questions. And after about 40 minutes, depending on how long it takes, we're going to open up to any questions you have. So please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. And Colleen, our facilitator, will help monitor that, and we'll go to your questions at that point. So that's the plan. And with that, I would like to introduce the panel to you. And as you can see, hopefully you all can see what's on the screen right now. As I mentioned, I'm Karen Cohn. I work with a wide range of advisory boards, in particular focused on AI and fintech. I also work with the Masters. I'm a venture partner with the Masters Fund, where we focus on raising money for women entrepreneurs and funding women entrepreneurs, which is actually how Lake Di and I met, if those of you were listening earlier. Until a couple of years ago, I was the Microsoft General Manager responsible for worldwide financial services. I also was CEO of Tower Group and a board director until I sold that to CEB, and which then went to Gartner. Worked with Gartner and IBM and MasterCard in a number of corporate positions. So it's fun now and that I'm working with a lot of startups. Greg Jennings, CTO and co-founder of MondoBrain. MondoBrain is AI software that he can tell you about. But what's interesting about MondoBrain is not only is it very advanced analytics and leading edge analytics, but also has the opportunity for machine and human interaction. Greg's a very experienced data scientist, a software engineer, was the technical editor for a book called Data Smart, which all the data scientists love to read, and has been with both startups and big companies like Booz Allen. Now, Clara Derodi is joining us from the UK. So thank you, Clara, for giving your evening to us. She's the founder and executive chair of Cognitive Finance Group, and also the author of a fascinating book called Decoding AI in Financial Services. It's focused on as a guide for board members and senior executives. And while it says financial services, I can tell you, having read it, that is applicable across industries and a valuable read for conversations on the business side and with executives. And as you can see from the slide, Clara has some tremendous experience working with the World Economic Forum and a number of special commissions on AI in the UK, in Japan, in the European Union, and other arenas. Martha Montoya is the CEO and founder of Ag Tools. Now, this is also AI software for farmers and agricultural supply chain. As you can see, she's got more than 25 years experience. She's in this arena. She serves on the California Board of Agriculture and Food. She works with a number of advisory boards with Walmart's Worldwide Advisory Board of Women. And Martha is a practitioner who has really married industry with the capabilities of what artificial intelligence can offer. And last but not least on our panel, Tom Austin. Tom is the CEO and founder of the Analyst Syndicate, which is a platform that provides leading tech research and business analysis. Tom launched the Analyst Syndicate a couple of years ago after spending many years, I think about 25 years, Tom can correct me, but at Gartner, where he was head of research, Gartner fellow, and covered areas such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, network computing, and other areas. And when I asked Tom to join this panel, he said, I'd love to because I've started my career in brain sciences and it's been my favorite area ever since. So we've got a good team. Anyone on the panel, did I miss something that you want to mention?
We're good to go.
We're good to go. I did it right. Yay. Okay. What I wanted to do was just set the stage a bit, as we look at this this arena. And to set the stage, I was looking around at various definitions for AI. And then I realized, you know what? There's so many definitions of artificial intelligence and so many different points of view that I realized that AI technologies really change or upset our understanding about what technology can do. And the other thing that's been interesting is its cyclical nature. And we've had some discussions with this in preparation with the panel. But what's interesting about artificial intelligence is it's been achieving what was historically believed to be always impossible. And what we've done, we've then realized that it almost impossible isn't impossible. An amazing innovation has come about. Nonetheless, over time, we also dig in and we start to see the limitations of these amazing innovations, and maybe they're not as good as we thought they were. So we push through, and amazing innovations become aging innovations. And once again, we turn and conquer the impossible. So it's kind of a life cycle of AI, if you like. I also just want to mention that there have been waves of artificial intelligence technology over the years. In fact, they go back to as far as the 1950s, believe it or not. In the 1950s, researchers believed that building human-level intelligence in machines would take place within a couple of decades. Well, obviously that didn't happen. And when such grand claims over the years in the 80s and later failed, these booms would give way to what some people call an AI winter, and research dried up. However, that said, modern AI has been far more successful and is being applied. So if you look at this, what you're seeing here, which is this, if you like, the progression of AI, I think everyone would agree that descriptive and diagnostic analytics have progressed a lot. It's kind of like what we often call BI, or business intelligence. So if you look at descriptive analytics, it is based on hindsight. It looks at what happened, and it really looks at all the data to the data. Everything about AI is about the data. We progress then into the diagnostics that said, why did it happen? All right, and if you look at why it happened, what we talk about is the machine doesn't exactly answer the why. What the machine does is provide facts and data that can then be brilliantly absorbed by humans so that human beings can look and use what the AI presents in order to determine the why, if you like. As you know, as we've moved into predictive analytics, and we're seeing a lot of that, what may happen. Now, understand that predictive analytics are based on training. You train the machine, you train it to see patterns, pre-identified patterns, and match these. So there are a lot of patterns, a lot of training that goes into predictive analytics as we move on. I think the aspiration that we're seeing is to move from hindsight and insight to foresight. And this is where we're talking about predictive analytics. Now, that's tough. That's systems that themselves build explanatory models to really characterize real world situations and infer what the cause is, but without training and without identifying patterns. They identify the patterns themselves. And from this foresight, it really could help shape the future. the what if scenarios, the relationships between something in real time. It can optimize the good, as Clara will often say. This optimizes we can find ways to optimize the good and stop the bad. Now, one can really debate as to, I think everyone's comfortable that we've achieved descriptive and diagnostic analytics, hindsight and insight, predictive analytics, we're seeing more and more. I'm not sure that we've achieved prescriptive analytics, but I know that there's an awful lot working on that. So sort of with that introduction, what I wanted to do was turn over to us our next set of questions that we have, a set of questions that we have going on here. And I've just lost my Zoom picture, which isn't good. Let me see if I can get that back. So as we look at these different areas, I just wanted to start first with Greg and say, hey, Greg, you're an AI practitioner, okay? You've been in the field for some time. Where do you think we are now with AI? What do you see as some of the biggest limitations? Are these limitations impacting Mondobrain at all?
Thank you very much, Karen, and thanks everybody. It's an honor to be here and speaking with everybody at the panel. It's a very good question, and I like your introduction very much and how you kind of referenced back to a lot of that work that was done in the 1950s. And back in the 1950s, they originally instituted a lot of this as a summer research project. They thought that actually a lot of this was going to be covered at that time, but a lot of the same limitations are still there. And a lot of them are around generalizing concepts. And so thinking about the limitations of AI, there are a number of them. And that's not to say there haven't been some amazing advances in AI recently. And really AI is a set of techniques around natural language processing, and image recognition, and the AlphaGo system, which beat, I guess, Lee Sedol, the grand champion in Go. But still, a lot of those same problems exist and those same limitations. They tend to be kind of data hungry. So there are a lot of applications and approaches around something called transfer learning that are trying to help that, but they still tend to be pretty data hungry. They also tend to be opaque or kind of hard to interpret, which is a problem for decision makers that have to trust their results. And also they can kind of tend to break in surprising ways when they don't work. And that's the last area is they tend to be kind of brittle, that is not very resilient to changes in the environment they're operating in. So there's a few examples, which is, the AlphaGo system before it played Go, they trained it to play these Atari video games. You've probably seen these games like Breakout, and they trained it, it was perfect. It beat everything better than the best human could possibly play. But they move that paddle up 1-2 pixels. This is the game with the bricks that you have to bounce the bricks around. They move that paddle up 2 pixels, human barely recognizes the difference. They play it just like they would otherwise. Completely breaks the AI system. So they're learning something. They're learning some kind of representations, but not quite exactly like we do as people. And there's a researcher named Rachel Thomas, one of the founders of Fast AI, who has said it, I think, the best that I've seen, which is that the difference is humans can sort of refine and conceptualize their decisions when they come across new data before they make the prediction or the decision, but AI algorithms don't have that moment of reflexivity, sort of. And so all that combines to make AI currently, though it's extremely powerful and useful in tons of applications, sometimes it can be difficult to apply in practice. So to the question about how they're affecting Mondobrain, actually, we try to make AI systems that are both sort of easier to use in terms of approachability and more interpretable in terms of the usability, because we view it as those issues tend to only be issues if you view what your goal is as having the machine replace the human. But if you think about it as an entire system and you think about it in a collaborative way instead, then it actually becomes a little bit easier to enlarge the problem and think about the human as part of the system. Because humans do some things really well, which is our ability to generalize and conceptualize, and the machines do some things really well, which is the ability to crunch a bunch of data. So if you put them together, then I think that that's the most effective way forward, at least for right now. So while I think the future of AI is really bright, we're still really just at the beginning. And does have those limitations, but our view is that it will work best, at least in the near term, when it's used to amplify and assist people rather than to replace them.
Yeah, Greg, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering, when you talk about amplifying humans, how does a human converse with the AI in, say, a Mondo brain, or converse with a Mondo brain?
Mm-hmm. So in that manner of speaking, that people are able to look at the data and they are able to kind of infer a representation from that data, and they can infer some causality from it. So if you had a business problem represented in Mondo Brain, what you'd be asking Mondo Brain to do is to surface all the combinations of factors that tend to drive an outcome in one direction versus those combinations of factors that tend to drive it in the other direction. Now, those insights are something that you, as the expert decision maker, and you as a knowledgeable person on the process, can use to actually go forward and make a better decision. Even though, as a system, the AI doesn't necessarily have a representation of causality, and it doesn't have this generalization. If you combine those insights that it can very rapidly produce with the human's ability to kind of converse with and ask the system to produce them in a targeted way, then you can get a system that's a little bit greater than the sum of its parts.
Got it. So when you combine a human and a machine, you can be prescriptive, even if the machine can't do it itself. And so, we're fortunate because we have on this panel both people who are practitioners, as well as thought leaders in the industry. I'd like to turn to one of our other practitioners, Martha. Martha, with the coronavirus pandemic, the impact of the food and agricultural supply chain has the impact it has on our lives have come to the forefront. I must admit, I never thought of it much before, but with ag tools, you use artificial intelligence to recognize the movement of commodities based on consumer demand, production, and I think all kinds of other criteria. Can this capability help reduce food wastage and get food where it's needed? And can it help the farmers stay in business especially if we have a crisis like we have now?
Well, we hope so, and we have no choice because we have to feed too many people by 2050. Everybody, when they think ag industry, they think the raw crops, the corn, the rice, the wheat. That's how our society was established. But we have the new generation that thinks fruits, vegetables, cilantro, tomatoes, which is what we're now eating, and millennials in particular are moving towards that industry or that world. And the Gen Zs will definitely be on that. And now with the plant-based industry, which is not as much meat or whatever, everything plant-based. So I want everybody to think that this is not your typical world anymore. And not only because of coronavirus, but because in general, every single recession and every single hit on the economy, fruits and vegetables keep going up because the new generation understand what you put in your body is what is going to make you healthy. So yes, what happened is that we are in the most volatile industry within the industries of the world. Think you cut a tomato, and I always tell people, if you don't move it the next day, it's 50% less value. And the following day, you might as well throw it away because it has no value. Nobody buys a tomato that is 2-3 days old. You wouldn't buy a tomato in the supermarket more than 2-3 days old. Why? Because that's not our mentality of freshness. So how do you put in all these mechanical elements? And I always compare with, as Greg was mentioning in the past, when 20, 30 years ago, all this was starting to be developed, we had these machines that were very linear. And our ag is not linear. It moves like this. And so how do we make sure that all this data is moving fast, but without being linear. And I think that's, today we have the tools that we didn't have 25 years ago. And I always compare people this. I used to have a Ford 56 that no matter was a solid car, but today I need a Tesla because it needs to be lighter, less gasoline, easier to move. I can adapt things. So in ag, we're trying to make sure that all the data that we're accumulating worldwide from the world, not from the growers, but from the governments, from the day-to-day, a truck crossing the border at midnight or at 3 a.m., all that data comes in and starts saying so many tomatoes, so many cilantro is showing, and what are the patterns based against 67 variables that impact at any time, because you're thinking blueberries and you're eating blueberries maybe from Michigan, maybe from Peru, maybe from Argentina, maybe from Fresno, California. So you have all these layers of data that you have to start plugging with weather patterns, exchange rates, holidays. So every time that you sit down, if there's a conclusion, enjoy your food because it's a lot of work.
Well, if you combine all these factors, all right, let's say you have a buyer, let's say it's Walmart or Dole, all right.
Mhm.
If I understand correctly, somebody like Dole, for example,
Mhm.
has lots of farmers that they work with. If Dole or a Walmart as a buyer has this information from this AI system that's interpreting all of this data, can they impact the
100%.
timing of their farmers and what they do?
100%, because there are two reasons for that. It used to be the baby boomers will, and before the baby boomers, you had a curve to learn the industry longer, to understand how the industry behave. Now the curve doesn't exist. I have buyers that get into buying tomatoes or lettuce, and they were store managers or something else or engineers, and now they're buying literally millions and millions, even billions of dollars, and no experience. So you need to find a tool to give them fast thinking process so they're able to make decisions, because one single buyer can impact to 8 to 6 to 900 farmers in one shot by saying, I want pineapples in June. Well, guess what? June patterns in Costa Rica are normally year after year, and the machine will tell you that in June there's a lot of rain and certain specific regions, therefore the pineapples are not going to come in as you want it, yet the buyer says, I want my pineapples. So the farmers have to suffer to deliver those pineapples no matter what, not to lose the customer. And in order to do that, you're losing money, and eventually you break down. And so by a buyer seeing this, say, hey, I don't need to buy in June, the 2 weeks of June, we lower the volume, we lower the merchandising, or we don't pack too much, or we don't do too many juices, and we don't have as much. And then the second thing that the machines will be doing, and hopefully fresh and processed are always competing. So instead of compete, buy when there's a lot of volume, to be able to absorb that from the farmers, so the farmers don't go out of business versus throwing it away. So today we lose 62,000 truckloads per day in the world, from the farm to the distribution center. Everybody thinks it's in the refrigerator, or it's really between those
Yeah.
center
Well,
points.
without the capability to really interpret the data, that massive amount of data quickly, it would seem that it would be very difficult to manage a global market of food. So this could be a big differentiator. Yeah. Let me jump over. Let me ask Clara. Clara, we've heard a bit from Greg and Martha about some of the things that AI can do and some of the applications. But there's also a lot of fear around artificial intelligence. A lot of fear about, will it invade my privacy? Is it going to take away jobs? I'm wondering if you could share some of your thoughts around the deployment of ethical and trusted AI, and maybe what kind of advice you give to decision makers on boards or business executives.
Thank you, Karen. It's an absolute pleasure to join you from London today, and I would say that there is a lot of work ahead of us when it comes to building trusted and ethical AI. It is a lot of work ahead of us, not only because the volume of data requires a lot of work, but because we have adopted this technology with not a lot of thought with regards to what it actually does, with regards to transparency, accountability, and explainability of the systems. And the impact is very profound. And now we are seeing some of this shapes of this impact. So I think in financial services, which is my area of specialism, I used to be a practitioner in London and in wealth management in Europe. But since 2015, I've started working slowly to build an ecosystem of trusted AI in financial services. And I've seen a lot of changes in how decision makers look at this technology when they decide to procure it or they decide to shape their business strategy with it. Ultimately, for business executives, if this technology does not add value to their strategy, then something is not working in the right way. So there are a lot of challenges. And as I said earlier, transparency, accountability, and explainability are the three main concerns board directors have when it comes to adoption of AI. The proposition we have built over the years with Cognitive Finance Group is to enable decision makers to have visibility over at least these three concerns. And we have provided them with frameworks to enable them to know what good AI looks like. So I guess one of the biggest challenges when it comes to the civil society, I think, and I think these challenges will permeate into financial services and other industries, is the change of purpose of collecting data. So when we collect data for the purpose of improving the supply chain and ensuring that the tomatoes are fresh and they're not 3 days older, that's the purpose for which we collect the data and we use it and we process it and we deploy technology to enable us to understand what it means to our business. In the same way, in financial services, when we collect data on how people spend using their credit cards in order to ensure that we provide better services to them, that's the purpose. But when we collect data and change that purpose to use the data for surveillance or to get into people's life or draw conclusions or ensure that we maximize profits, then that's problematic. Equally, in financial services, we have seen places, and not just financial services, we've seen fintech companies which label themselves as AI companies and hype the technology they're using. And sadly enough, a case like this is happening as we speak with Wirecard in Germany. And according to the FT, apparently the use of AI over the past few years actually has been absolutely inflated. And the trust in the business, in the management, in the governance is completely shot. So what is the reason of deploying technology which we cannot use for the purpose which was built for, in a way which is transparent, in a way in which we are accountable for it, and in the way in which we deliver explainability and we are able to keep the human in the loop to deliver this characteristics. So the work which Mondobrain is doing, I think it's very important, and in financial services is absolutely essential. And I think there are applications in other industries as well. So as far as the board of directors are concerned, I think they want to have this vision, this clarity of what they need to do, what kind of technology they're buying, and ensure that what they're buying, it's actually serving the business purpose for which they're running a business. You've also asked me what kind of advice I give to board of directors to ensure that they bring in-house and they procure, they develop and maintain trusted and ethical AI, is to invest time and education in governance of this technology is absolutely essential. We can continue to be profitable and be ethical and use trusted technology. There's no doubt. I have several examples of some of the clients I worked with. It's actually cheaper to deploy trusted and ethical AI than to deploy technology which we cannot qualify it as such, because sooner or later we will have to wind it back and we have to replace it, and the whole exercise is very expensive, not to mention the reputational risk. So governance is important. The second element is skills. They need to invest in delivering basic foundational AI skills to their entire staff. And one of the recommendations I have for my clients is to start training even the receptionist. So there's no one, everybody needs to have basic AI skills or foundational knowledge. And the third advice I give is to invest in talent. You need, as a business, you need to ensure that you bring quality people, talented AI scientists, and also people who understand or are able to bridge the gap between the business and the tech. And there are not that many who really understand how to bridge this gap. So there's a lot to talk about it, but I hope I managed to capture a little bit of it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I would, it's good advice for people. And I would say, I mean, for board members, but also for leadership teams who are doing the hiring and doing the training of people. I just had one quick follow on. When you, who polices that AI is being used for the purpose in which it was committed to use? Who polices the fact, whether AI is ethical and privacy is adhered to? Does this mean we need more regulation in AI?
I think as far as financial services is concerned, I think, yes, we need that level of clarity. This is my view. We need that level of clarity from the regulator to enable us to have some frameworks which we can then use when it comes to the procurement. We need to have a common denominator toolbox when it comes to procurement of technology in our industry, and I'm sure it's the same case in other industries as well. So regulations, but it doesn't mean even more complicated. In this instance, more regulations actually removes the headache, which I'm very certain that it will happen sooner or later for those companies which actually do not deploy trusted and ethical AI.
Thank you, Clara. With that, I think I'm going to jump over to Tom and ask you, Tom, there's been a tremendous amount of hype around AI. A lot of people saying it's going to transform the world very quickly. It's going to impact how we work, jobs, other areas. You are one of the original creators of the Gartner hype cycle. So you're very conscious of the direction and the speed of technology. Do you think AI is going to have a very rapid impact on us? Do you see it as disruptive? I guess, is there competitive imperative for us all to get into the AI game?
No.
No, okay.
All right, so let's pay attention here, okay? There's far too much hype. I'll be the first to start out by saying I am really impressed by a lot of the dramatic progress we've made in certain areas of AI, and I'll try to describe those in a minute or two. But I think that and Greg was referring to this indirectly, I think, or directly in his comments. We're also at a point where AI has gone through two major spurts of growth in this decade, and we're running out of continued improvement. I remember having conversations with the winners of the ACM Turing Awards in 2018, trying to poke at them. So is this stuff slowing down? You know, what's the problem? And so I got into the dynamics of what's going on in the industry. And we have two fundamental problems. The first one is, and I think all of the leaders who are deep into the research will say the same thing on this question. What's missing in deep neural networks and neural networks and their ability to achieve the kind of solve the kind of problems that we'd like to solve with them? And the common expression today among the researchers is this stuff lacks common sense. It doesn't learn the way people do. It doesn't learn the way children do, and on and on. And so point number one is, you know, a child will learn the visual cliff experiment at age 6 to 8 months, if I remember correctly, in developmental psychology. And people learn things in one trial learning. Yet we need hundreds of megabytes or billions of megabytes to train something similar using deep neural networks. So there's a deep problem there. And the problem is not going to be solved simply by throwing bigger hardware at it and more data at it. It really takes a rethinking. So that's problem number one. Now, before I go to problem number two, I want to say, boy, there's some tremendous stuff going on in agriculture around the application of vision-based systems installed on tractors to identify which plants need which nutrients and water and so forth. So it's a micro agriculture at a massive global scale to increase yield and productivity. So I'm not saying this stuff doesn't work. I'm saying that there are real limits that we're running into on these vision systems. And second, there's real limits we're running into on conversational technology. So conversational technology today, you know, using Siri or talking to Alexa or talking to a chat bot on the internet. What we're primarily dealing with today are technologies that were built in 30, 40, 50 years ago with enhancements since, but they're all decision trees where somebody has to figure out, all right, what are the different words that a user could utter that would result in a particular intent, and what do we do next? And so it's a large, complex programming challenge. But then there's companies like Google and Microsoft and Facebook and OpenAI, the OpenAI Foundation, have all made significant advances in training with huge bodies of knowledge, training these textual-based systems so that in the past 4 or 5 months, let me think for a minute. We've had Mina, we've had Blender, we've had GPT-3, to mention 3 different projects that have come along. We now have technologies that don't have to be programmed with the specific intent tree or decision tree and all of the vocabulary that they'll use when they generate text. Instead, they just train them on huge amounts of information to be simple. The problem is these things sound smart. They carry on a better conversation, but they also hallucinate because they're statistical. They don't have an understanding of the meaning of the language that they're using. And frankly, in natural language processing, which is the general domain, people haven't figured out how to control this to the point where we can really liberate ourselves from these decision tree-based systems. And the thinking is that we'll resolve these problems if we can take a lot of the semantic knowledge we've been accumulating over the last 40 or 50 years in knowledge graphs and marry knowledge and understanding of language with these huge statistical knowledge bases that we've built so that they'll be operating based on knowledge. I'm giving you a hypothesis. Let me sort of give you a conclusion. The problem, there are many problems here. The industry is full of hype. There's one author out there who's written a book talking about it's like a Cambrian explosion. It's going to be like an extinction of all the living animals on the face of the earth. It's a CEO whose name you would recognize, Karen, and we're not going to go there because I don't want to knock people. Knock ideas. Okay, there are other people who say if you don't invest now In AI, you're going to be destroyed by your competition because they're going to invest in AI. You'll be behind and you'll be dead. And I think that most of these statements border on the ridiculous. And I think, Karen, I had one slide I shared with you that had a bar graph on it.
Yeah, I can show that.
Yeah,
Hang on.
if you could just put that up for a minute. So this is
Sure.
a paper that was published in May, I believe, and it's looking at, and I'm just waiting for it to show
Give me
up.
a second here to get it up.
Sure.
All right, there it is.
So this is actual job postings by industry in terms of the percentage of jobs that spec'd out AI capabilities. You'll notice, so who's invested heavily? Well, it's the people who are in IT. It's the Googles, it's the Microsofts, it's the IBMs, it's the Alibaba, it's Baidu, and so forth. Who's second? The service providers, the consulting firms who want to sell everybody on their ability to do fantastic things with AI. And you start going, you'll notice agriculture is pretty high on this chart. Okay, because there is real opportunity in mining and mineral exploration and mineral extraction and so forth. Very, very big. But a lot of the other industries, much, much lower. We've had a panic. I think that the AI hype has created a panic in industries where people are going out trying to hire more AI expertise than they need. And the reason I say that is I believe that most organizations will be investing heavily in AI. Not through their own devices, not by custom building their own solutions, but by going out and buying from some of the information technology providers the things that they've built. And I think it's a fool's errand unless you're in the technology space itself, you're on a fool's errand if you're doing the science work now. You don't need to do the science work. You need, and I'm not disagreeing with Clara, you really need people who understand what's there, not in the AI sense alone. This is really an understanding, what are the algorithms? What are the rules that are operating inside the package? What is the data that's been fed into it to condition it to behave in a particular way? And we've got a long, long way to go before, our legal system protects, hides algorithms, hides code, makes data proprietary. And we've got to figure out how to crack that nut open, not just for AI, but for the applications of information technology in general, so that we can have more transparent and accountable and explainable systems, or better measured systems. So you can have a replacement for explainability is predictability. How predictable is that system? We don't have reliable, consistent performance tests to measure quality. We don't have it. The alternative is explainability. We don't have transparency. So how do you get accountability? And we have a little bit of it in some places, but anyhow.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of, I hear what you're saying, that there's, maybe we need to invest in AI, but maybe not as critically. What I also hear though, and I'm going to turn this question over to Greg actually. Greg, we hear a lot, I think Tom mentioned that while you may not need to invest as quickly as a lot of people say in AI, I think he agrees that we need to invest in data and data management. And we hear a lot about shortages of data scientists, of shortages of engineers. I'm wondering, how do you see this impacting the ability to develop AI solutions or for customers to deploy them?
Good question. I think that actually the problem, a lot of this, the problem that both Clara and Tom, you guys were talking about it, and this question in general, it really boils down to one of requiring data fluency within an organization. So what I would mean by that is people have to understand what the limitations of AI and in general analytics systems are before they can actually apply them effectively within their organization. And they have to understand what those limitations are, what those boundaries are, and importantly, what things like what kind of biases can be introduced by training those algorithms on certain sets of data. And I think there is a desire among some players in the industry to kind of press that that AI is sort of like a magical black box that can, it's sort of like the magic 8 ball. You shake it, it gives you the answer all the time, right? But it's not really that way, and that brittleness comes from the fact that you're training those AI systems on data sets, which they themselves might have a lot of underlying bias in them, or sometimes maybe harder to spot than bias are blind spots. So I mentioned AI does a really good job if it's seen situations like that before and the rules are kind of the same, but as soon as you start to drift away from what those constraints are, it starts to do the job less and less well. So back toward, thinking through what those limitations are in terms of companies trying to hire AI and data scientists, I think, there is a need within organizations to have people who are qualified and data fluent in leadership and decision authority positions who can understand what some of those limitations are, even if they're not actually practitioners, building those models and doing that deep research, right? It's so important for them to understand where those limitations and boundaries are.
Yeah, so you would presumably need those data scientists and engineers. I want to jump over to Clara. Clara, any thoughts or any reactions to what Thomas said?
So, I see the gist of what Tom is trying to convey, and partially I see the reason to have this kind of line of thinking. However, there are instances in financial services where I see companies losing market share, not being able to service their clients. COVID crisis has shown us how our infrastructure in financial services is not able to cope with a lot of services which we need to provide as an industry, like loans, for instance, or I don't know, providing holiday homes for mortgages for customers of banks. So when this type of volume of data and work is thrown as a business, if a business doesn't have the infrastructure to be able to deal with it, then there are two instances. Clients won't be served and they'll move. And obviously the market share of that particular business will shrink. My prediction is that over time, companies which don't adopt AI as a strategic engagement to preserve their market share and enhance it and provide improved services to their clients, those companies will lose. Yep. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's important on the point which Greg made about the leadership understanding the limitations and boundaries of this technology, and not being able to, not necessarily having to get into the tech. I would say, perhaps I would just put it in a more simple way and say, we all need to learn how to drive, right? We just get a driving license and we keep the car safe on the road. That's all we need. We don't need to learn how to build the engine or how to build a car. In the same way, leadership need to know how to keep this technology safe on the road, service their clients, and ensure that they're buying what they need. This would be my two thoughts on the importance of adoption of this technology to preserve market share and remain sustainable and relevant over time, and the importance of understanding what AI is as a principle, which are the limitations of this technology, from the leadership board level all the way down to the receptionist.
Great, thank you, Clara.
Financial
go ahead,
services
Tom. No,
was
please.
number 3 industry on that chart. And that's why financial services firms are investing more heavily than anybody else, except for the consulting firms and the information technology firms themselves. So, absolutely agree around the risk. I think there are other risks too around the biases that humans have, including board members and how they interpret data. But that's a different discussion for a different day, I think.
Yeah,
Well,
Tom, there's a
gender bias,
question here. I want to jump to one of the questions in the chat box because I think it's right along the same reasoning, and maybe we've somewhat answered it. But Tom, the question is regarding your chart showing the percentage of AI jobs rather than hiring for AI. Shouldn't companies have citizen data scientists, assuming that the augmented analytic tools are robust and available? So that
I don't think it, yes. The simple answer is yes. Citizen data sciences, that means that you need data literacy, you need numeracy, you know, people understanding numbers. You need their AI-based crutches and natural language generation tools that will help people to better understand what is the data saying, rather than just relying on others. So citizen data science is to help people get around the limitations in knowledge and skill. Very, very important here.
yeah, and then I'm gonna just I'm jumping to some of the questions in the chat box, which I'm gonna read. But Martha, there's a question here for you, asking why can't the industry insist on qualified buyers? And by that, Nancy means qualified agricultural buyers.
Well, I'll answer too with Greg and Tom, and we'd include Clara on a couple elements because we have to also walk the fine line of ethics. Our industry is regulated by the Department of Justice, and very few people understand that. They think it's Department of Agriculture. And the reason is because anything that you suggest to the farmer, and if you don't deliver, you're personally liable on that farmer because it's the livelihood of a farmer. So that pushes the industry to be more straightforward in walking the fine line. But then the second part of that is, there's a question that was in the chat, would the human being be replaced? When I started walking this whole path of the AI, and I've been in this industry worldwide, literally worldwide, developing crops. We have so many variables in our industries that we need human beings. We still need the CIA guy on the ground who's going to find out what's going on in the ground, that there's no AI that will tell them that ABC person walks into they still need the investigation part of the whole world. So we still need human beings, and especially we need human beings that understand industries, because everything starts with the industry. I can sit down and do a lot of coding, and I've seen a lot of kids doing coding, but not understanding the industry and the variables that can impact that industry not only create a problem like Clara mentioned, but it also create a financial. And how long can you burn cash before you figure out that what you're doing is not what you're supposed to be doing? So the good news is we need human beings to understand the industry. The tough of it is that it is tough for the human brain to absorb so much data. So when I'm asked why is it that they don't qualify buyers, because precisely it is a tough industry. It's a 24/7 industry, both on the farming all the way through logistics. Literally, people have no life in this industry because you're moving by the seconds. So to bring somebody on this industry is tough. Farmers, we are losing farmers because it's all a consignment industry. So it's an industry that until it touches the distribution center, it doesn't have a price. It has apparently a price, but until it touches. So it has so many variables. So food supply in general, AI, I can tell you that we're even behind anybody who's creating this whole AI world, and we're applying the data. In our case, we won the competition, the worldwide competition, not because we were smart, but because we have data from anywhere in the whole world versus trying to gather data from individuals, because getting data from individuals is much harder than when you have general data. And that is going to be one of the things that we're going to be challenged. The data, you're right, Greg, the data.
Yeah, so you need, and of course, that's the brilliance of the machine, is that it can analyze it, aggregate and analyze large amounts of data. we're running low on time, but there is one more question or comment that I'll take from the chat box. It says, it seems we need a lot more regulation, but not the dumb kind we're used to, but well-informed, seasoned, tech-savvy people. Do the panelists agree? Clara has been talking about intelligent regulation. Clara, anybody else? Quick comment on that?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree without more. It's very important that those who set the regulations, first of all, have an absolute deep understanding of the technology, and also deep understanding of the industry. Exactly as Martha was saying, if you're not an expert in that industry, then something is you are missing a lot. So that's very important. What's very important also is to pick up on, and one final thought for everybody is to remind ourselves that algorithms have parents. In other words, we are responsible for what we build, what we put out there. And we try, algorithms have parents. It's a lot of conversation around pushing the responsibility, the accountability for this technology to the machine. Machine has done this, machine has done that. No, that machine, that code is designed by, is built by a human. A human has to always stay accountable for what comes out. I know it's, I'm diving into like a big pit of controversial discussions, perhaps for other panels or other opportunities. One final thought for the audience tonight. There are many types of genders. Data is riddled with different types of biases. But one bias which apparently cannot be removed from the data, unlike the rest of them, is gender bias. And one of my friend academics says to me, how could we remove this gender bias when we've got it all the way to the back to the Old Testament? So it's something for us to really always, when we build the systems, to really understand that this gender bias is one of the most insidious and the most difficult to remove from the data, and always have to stay alert to ensure that we diminish it as much as possible.
That's great, Cara. And we've seen some strategies that companies have used to do that. And that could be a whole nother session. But I'm going to take that. My last question is, what's the one key takeaway you'd like to leave with all of us? Clara, I'm going to assume that's yours. And I'm going to
Algorithms have parents.
Yeah, algorithms have parents. Greg, how about you?
We all need data fluency, and we need to understand and be able to interpret the results of these systems, because they're going to make mistakes that are unexpected and surprising.
Great. Hey, Martha, one key takeaway for everybody?
I think the word is patience. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we all should be patient and tolerant as we build this. And also always thank anybody who serves you food.
Everyone who serves food. Tom.
Anything, any way you get food,
Sure.
thank them.
So buy business results, not technology. The technology will come inside the package. Don't focus on the technology, focus on the outcomes that you want to achieve, but then make sure that you can get access to the insides to see what's going on and how it was programmed and how it was trained and so forth. So focus on business results.
Business results. All right. That's great. Now, we actually have about a minute and a half left. So I'm going to, there was one question. It was the first question actually that came into the, which was, what are some of the highlights you all have in your careers so far? And I'm going to ask any of the panelists, if there was one highlight you'd really like to call out, is there something that comes just top of mind to you that you'd like to share with people? Anyone on the panel? Tom?
Very quickly from me. Sorry.
No, Tom, go ahead, and then we'll go. I think it was
Having the opportunity to create an association of over 30 analysts today, the Analyst Syndicate, just a real highlight. We're all independent, but we work to help each other out and be successful.
Martha or Clara, I wasn't sure who spoke up.
Clara.
Clara, one big highlight, and remember, we've got an audience full of women in technology. So as a woman,
I think the highlight for me was when in 2010 I went to the board of directors of my former employer, and after 6 months of looking at post-integration technology alignment, I went to them and said, we're not doing it right. We have to invest in intelligent automation. And there are systems out there, something to do with intelligence systems, artificial intelligence. They all looked at me, put their readers down and said, Clara, we like you. We know that you always look forward into the future, but you absolutely, completely lost it. So I'm glad that time has proved me right. And I'm glad that I'm absolutely delighted to be able to work in a space where I can shape the narrative a little bit every day at a time around the deployment of ethical and trusted AI in financial services for business growth and profitability.
We are at time now. And so I think what I'm hearing is if you see something innovative, futuristic going on that other people don't believe in, something disruptive, it's okay. Have the courage, be bold, step up and work on that, because it is that will make you stand out. It is that will make a difference. So with that, I really want to thank the panelists for your great insights. I want to thank the people, everyone who was the listeners, some great questions in the chat box, which I am going to save. And if we didn't get your question, I'll try to have myself or one of the panelists get back to you on that. So thank you all. Appreciate your great insights. And we're looking forward to soon converting our insights into foresight, together making human plus machine equal a great new future. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.